Oh, hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today, we're definitely going to be talking about a little bit of energy, a lot of energy, actually. And the person who's going to be telling us about this energy, relationships, and so much more is my friend Heather. How are you doing today, Heather?
I am doing very well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome.
Good. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, well, thank you for your time. I appreciate that. So, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the episode.
Sure thing. Yes. So my name is Heather Cypel. I'm an intuitive psyche specialist and a relationship energy specialist. So that kind of means that I do a virtual tour through someone's energy body and psyche and help them unravel whatever's kind of getting kinked up and creating issues in their life. I mean, we don't do healing work because it's just for fun. We do healing work because there's an issue and we want to feel better. We want things running more smoothly. And for me, romantic relationships are close to my heart. It's something that I'm coded for. It's just what I do, and I love it. And so, yeah, I delve very deeply into the energetics that are taking place in a female's energy body, causing things to not go exactly as she wants them to in her life. And we unravel those and get them ironed out and flowing smoothly.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit in the green room beforehand, and it really is a situation of we all have that. So, I know your focus is women, but we all have those energy pieces that are we're stuck because of our past or generationally. Is that right?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. We're very patterned beings. And one of the reasons that I focus on the female energy body, well, the main reason is because that's my own system. And so I learn experientially. But another reason is because, women bear children. And so every human has soaked in a female's energetics.
Yeah.
And we can improve the whole world when we improve our own energetics, even if we're not having children in this lifetime or our childbearing years are over. We can have generational shifts by doing the inner work for sure.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and in my book, when it's your time, when it's your time to soar, your heart knows when it's your time to soar. I talk about that is the first heartbeat we hear is the heartbeat of our mother.
Yes,
And people are like, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm like, well, just think about it. It's a lot of the energies. That's why oftentimes if a mother is going through some stress during the, birthing process. Well, not only the birthing process is going to be stressful no matter what, but it's
sure.
the whole gestation period. It then does translate. We've seen studies, and there's a million things about that energy. And how'd you get into doing this?
So many, many years ago, I ended up in a situation where I was beyond stressed. Life kind of blasted, and it was ridiculous. I was coming untethered, and the doctors and the medicine and the counseling just weren't cutting it. And I came across somebody who was offering energy healing, energy balancing. And I said, I don't know what that is, but I know my energy needs to be balanced. And it kind of opened up a world of things that I didn't even know that I had a passion for. Although when I was 4, I did have my first spiritual awakening. So I've always been very connected through my heart to spirit. My claircognizance was online ever since I was 4. And so, and also I just had a passion for theology when I was little. So when I learned energy work, it really like just kind of rounded it all out. It was in my world, um, the how-tos of spirituality, whereas religion kind of taught the basics or the mind part of it, and the energy work was the practical application. So spiritual development, inner development has always been an interest of mine. And when the energetics came forward, I was like, oh, this is everything. And then for a while, I was learning. It was the new phases. I got into deep level healing pretty quickly. after starting to learn about energetics. And at some point, even with the deep level energy work, I hit a glass ceiling. And I thought, okay, I have all of these great abilities to shift my own energy, to rework my own system. I can patch and repair my energy body. I can do all kinds of really great things, but the external world is just not calibrating to what I actually want. And that was when I put an SOS out to spirit. And I said, I'm very grateful for everything that I know. But I'm actually going to need better energy tools. I'm going to need tools that work faster and have consistent, tangible world results. And it took a while, but after about a year or so, some energy tools downloaded to me. And as I started working with them, it changed everything that I knew about spirituality and energy work. And um, it's been a little bit of a challenge for me to stand, and like kind of hold my tongue in the face of so much prevailing thought in the spiritual realm of, working with energy tools in a survival mode kind of way. I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of the energy work, a lot of the manifestation processes come from people who were initially in survival mode, and that's the reason that there's a cap, there's a limitation on the range, even deep level stuff. Even whenever you go, like, say for example, plant medicine or something extraordinarily deep like shamanic journeying, there's still always a cap. And I found that cap. I found what was happening in our system, and it's the fact that our energy bodies are very frozen. And it's
Mm.
not something that you would just generally see, because you kind of have to know how to access it, if you will. And so, as I've been working with those energetics, it's really been making me realize that the sooner we start getting to the operating system level of our energy body, the faster we can have those shifts. And then that led me to realizing what exactly is going on in females' energy bodies to create the experience that we have now. I mean, I truly believe that once women can actually master what's going on in their system and, as I say, adjust their presets from what they were originally preset and the minor amount of shifting that's happened, and really adjust those presets to be like your North Star, like exactly what you are doing in this world and having the experiences that you want, we can really shift the face of what's happening in our society as a whole. So we don't have to cry about it. We don't have to get triggered about it. We don't have to mourn it or grieve it. We can actually just get into our system and start shifting it from the inside. And we do see those tangible results come out in the external.
Well, okay. So how would one person notify it? Again, I love the woo, but some of that is especially at the beginning is just trusting that faith is like, okay, and until you see the results. I mean, I was there, years ago. I would have never believed any of this. I was like, no way, none of it works. You guys are just wacky.
Yeah.
And then I learned that it's not just that. There's so much that makes sense, even in the science aspects of it, that kind of questioned me. It intrigued my, the science side, and that's where it is. So could you explain this a little bit differently in that, as we talk about energy, but we do recognize it. So for everybody who's listening, think about it. When you walk up to people, some people just don't feel right. The energy because of maybe how they feel about themselves or vice versa. So could you explain that a little bit to us, Heather?
Absolutely. There's a saying, we teach people how to treat us, and it's an unconscious process, right? Like, we don't necessarily know that we're telling the boundary crosser, yeah, sure, you can cross my boundaries, and we complain about the boundary crosser. Or if someone is treating us in a disrespectful manner, from our conscious mind, we don't exactly know how to shift that. we can do all sorts of reactionary things or, go silent. We can do our trauma responses, but those aren't exactly helpful or useful. And when we are first learning energy work, it's that experiential shift that
Mhm.
really does it. When you can get still, when you can close your eyes, when you can feel and then go through the uncomfortable little thing and then you experience that level of peace, that's when I feel like it just clicks into place. The mind might get curious in advance, but it's that first experiential knowledge that really creates your, I guess you would say, conclusiveness about whether or
Yeah,
not this works.
right. Once that shift happens, once you again, I use the metaphor of once the window's open, right? If you have a closed window, if you're insistent in that it's not going to work or this is something not for you, that's okay. But once you open that window a little bit, and that's the magic when the energy shift, you allow that. What type of resources do you use or do you bring to people while you're working with them?
So, I've actually been really relying upon my energy transmissions that I've created. Because of the fact that this is like a brand new concept. I've never heard anyone teaching about this before. That we have a frozen energy body. I've made several energy transmissions to begin to defrost. And that has been tremendous. Tremendous. People have had massive progress. People who have been doing energy work for years, if not decades, have noticed the shift and the adjustment. And I do actually have a free one of those available for download, so that anybody can begin to work on defrosting their system because
Mm.
you get a lot of your own energy back. And I see that predominantly with women, they're getting to the point where there's like an exhaustion, like a soul level exhaustion, and maybe even like brain fog that goes along with it or whatever. But the other benefit from doing that is you get all of those painful emotions out. And I've done all of the trauma types of therapies and, attempting to relieve pain and suffering. And I had a lot on my system. I didn't have that awful of a life. I mean, I thought I had a pretty good life growing up, but man, the amount of frozen energy on my system was extreme. And so, yeah, it's been a magical ride for me because even though I was doing very deep level energy work, my system just felt heavier and heavier as the time went on. And so the defrosting has just been tremendous for me. I feel lighter, I feel younger, my body is functioning better than it was when I was in my 20s. I'm just like, whoa, this defrosting thing is not a small shift. It creates big shifts. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my like default resource that I send people to. Like get the free download first. And if you're noticing like I really like this, I actually have several more on my website where you can look for the pattern that you've really had in your life that has really caused a lot of pain. So maybe it's been abandonment or betrayal or neglect or loss and grief, So I've got all of these like major themes of what causes the suffering available in those little transmissions, and they're just wonderful.
As doing some of this work myself, what happens when is that where you use that intuitive side of you? Because there's some people who aren't recognizing the patterns, as they start explaining to you, you can see it or intuitively see the threads where, or maybe the areas where it need to be defrosted, and they haven't seen it yet.
Definitely, absolutely. And, as an intuitive psyche specialist, I'm very aware that when we're the one going through it, it's like this convoluted ball of, tangled yarn with leaves and sticks in there, right? And you're like, I don't see the individual threads. This is just a painful situation. And I can parse out what pieces or what, and then what to begin working first so that you can have your best progress because sometimes in the psyche, there are pieces that are all tangled and it's like if you don't work this first, then you're not going to have much movement with this piece, right? So we can kind of look at what exactly needs to go and be worked first, which is crucial.
Yeah, no, it is. I know. I don't know if you've ever heard of havening. Havening is a psychosensory touch modality to help relieve stresses and pressures, but it also helps with optimizing your brain. So it's a amygdala base. I've been trained in it, so
Cool.
yeah, it's really weird. When I tell people about it, I go, well, you get to touch yourself in a special way to heal yourself, and
Yes.
but it does it just by rubbing your hands. It's by creating the delta waves. So when you talk about the energy that needs to be defrosted, would somebody be able to identify that for themselves? Like for me, when I deal with a lot of stress, I feel it in my shoulders. And,
Yes.
so then I know, okay, I need to kind of defrost for myself, or probably not using the same way, but noticing that. And I'm very intuitive in noticing my body even more and more. I keep fine tuning that. How would
Yeah.
somebody know that they have areas to defrost?
There's a good number of symptoms. Muscle tightness is one. Having an emotion come up is another one. Not every single emotion is a stuck emotion, but unfortunately, a lot of them
Mm,
most of them, just because we haven't had that flow through. It's sort of like if your lymph system was all clogged up, right? Like it just couldn't flow through. So then you'll have pain in the areas where that lymph is blocked, right? And it's the very similar thing with the emotions, right? So our emotions, you'll notice when you're like, okay, this is upsetting me, and I remember the last time this happened and somebody else did it to me this time. It's like it's clogged, right? It's kind of connected and linking. That is all frozen energy. If you get tired after an emotional expression, that's an indicator of frozen energy, because if you don't have frozen energy, those emotions don't make you tired. If you're having looping patterns, that's a
mm.
very clear indicator. If it feels like salt in a wound when something happens, like this always happens to me, or I never get to experience something, that's definitely frozen energy. And there's something else too that I'm like, oh, it's right at the tip of my brain. It's like when you're in an interaction with someone and you feel the need to explain the same thing that you explained to your friend 10 minutes ago, and then you're going to call someone else and talk about it again. It's like that looping experience. And you feel like if you talk about it, it'll break through, but then that's not actually what's happening. It's looping and you're needing that over and over again. And then another way is if you feel like you cannot talk about that thing, if it's like too tender to talk about. Those are all indicators of frozen energy.
Right, a lot of self-awareness is to notice the patterns. But earlier when you were mentioning some of those patterns, the things that we have, a lot of those blend in together. So it's
Yeah,
not, it's not like you have a little blockage here, a little blockage there. They
yeah.
blend in together, do they, like with a memory, uh, using my language, using, like a memory, they're grouped together as a memory. So an instance, and then our brain summarizes it. Is that similar? That if it could be one relationship wise, but two, with other parts of your life as well.
I mean, certainly there's a way that the brain analyzes in categories, and then there's, or categorizes,
Mhm.
pardon me, and then there's a way that the emotions do it, right? So the brain can analyze things from lots of different ways and not necessarily cause an emotion about it. But when that emotion comes forward and it makes it seem like this has been a common picture in your life, right?
Mm.
Like if you could take still pictures from different instances and you're like, this happened and then this happened.
Yep.
And it's kind of like when we're feeling low or down, we can think of all the unpleasant things that happen. And then when we're happy and up, we could think about all of the wonderful things that happen. It's like there's a way that the mind analyzes, but then there's a way that the emotions analyze. And I feel like the emotions are the more distorted lens, or the more the area where we can find the quickest into the healing work, right? Maybe a better way of phrasing that.
Yeah, no, and so you also had mentioned earlier that you felt that you were intuitive at 4. How did that happen? What led you to believe that?
It's a very fascinating story. I reflect upon it often, actually. So I was in preschool, and it was a religious school. So we were learning the letter A, and there was a Bible verse under it we had to memorize. And it was, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. And immediately, like a light bulb went off, and my 4-year old self said, no, no, that is not possible. No one can fall short of the glory of God. And as a 4-year old, you couldn't possibly know something like that logically,
Right.
experientially, right? That was a soul knowing for sure. And of course, it wasn't until I got to college and my degrees in history, so studying lots and lots around the backdrops of Christianity, and realized that, oh, it was Paul that wrote Romans and also most of the New Testament. I'm like, oh, okay. So then, henceforth, when people would ask me, well, are you Christian? I would say I only follow Jesus' teachings. Like I don't follow anything that's opposite of that. And I don't think a lot of Christians realize that they do. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I enjoy talking about religion, and I'm like anything that's not talking about love or supporting others is man-made, and once it's
Yes.
man-made, that's where we all get into trouble with any religion, right? We all believe, or many of us believe, heaven. If you're atheist, I respect that as well, but
Right.
it's the, I don't know, uh, that's the thing, and when I always go, okay, who said it? Who made me say it? And if it's really from God, then it's all gonna be about love and that unconditional
Yeah,
love. God,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, because my heart was like connected with spirit, and I would get these clarities, I guess you would say, like the theology unfolded a bit more clearly for me. And by the time I was 9, I realized that there was no adult around that I could ask a theological question to, because they didn't understand at the level that I was
Mm.
comprehending at. So at 9, I finally got the memo, like one of these things is not like the other, like other people are not having this internal communication with spirit like I was having. They were understanding religion through the mind. So I just stopped talking about theology with people, but lo and behold, people kept asking me. I mean, I was the wallflower. I was so shy and quiet, but somehow people would seek me out and ask theological questions. And as I would begin to start explaining, like just from my heart, just from the connection with spirit, they would start arguing with me. And I'm like, wait, this is not a debate. Like,
Right.
I didn't engage in a debate here. Also, that's just very narrow. I think people want to justify their judgments, or when people, I think some people come to theology and they want to figure out how they're the good one, how they're safe,
Well,
how
right.
they're going to get to heaven.
Yep.
And they frame certain things in certain ways that their system can deal with. It's like all these justifications, right? And if you in any way try to pull a thread, it's like a Jenga block game, It's like you're gonna crumble their
Yeah.
whole faith. And I'm like, I don't understand how people can have faith in concepts, right? Like the theology, the liturgy, it's supposed to guide us towards inner understanding, or so I thought. And a lot of people
Well,
like put that as their foundation, as the rug that can be pulled out from under them.
yeah, and that's where everybody gets stuck is, your faith is, my faith, my understanding of faith is different than yours, and I have to be more right than you wrong, and
Yes.
that's where we all get, you know, jammed up. So,
Yeah.
but when we get jammed up, So like obviously with relationships, I know your specialty is dealing with women because you have that familiarity.
Yes.
But what would you suggest to us men? How do how do we clear our own, defrost our own blockages, but also help our support our partners or friends to get through that. It's never good
Yeah.
by saying, "Hey, Heather, you got this problem." But how would be a great way to identify it either within ourselves or our partners?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like how to support a female, I always say just know that even though they don't realize it, they are in pain, right? So I think a lot of men get a little bit freaked out by women's emotional expressions and trauma responses, because
We
they
want to
could be
solve
intense.
things. Yeah, we
Yeah, yeah. And so I would say first, just, get a little bit more gentle. I feel like the number one thing that women are feeling in this world is that it's just too abrasive, too pushy, too intense. So becoming, a little softer with your tone of voice, not becoming a doormat, not becoming a punching bag, holding a line saying, okay, I'm here for you. You can talk to me if you want to. You can bring things forward, but we're not going to go over to this abuse process. If you want my engagement, stay here, stay present with me, use I words instead of you words. I think
yes.
that's like what our society is learning right now on the emotional front. Like start the sentence with I. Um, as far as men noticing what's going on in their own system, certainly men have trauma and frozen energy bodies to a certain degree. Maybe not to the extent as a lot of women are having, which is why there's this strange thing going on where men are like, wait, what? I don't understand. And women are like, we're suffering here, And so there's like this massive dichotomy. But what I've noticed, the more you defrost your energy body, the more you're like, I'm well, like, what's going on? And then people who are in extreme suffering are like, but I'm suffering here. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm having to do that work for someone else, saying, like, okay, it's okay that you're suffering. We can move you forward, right? We can do this collaboratively. So it's very interesting. A lot of people say, but if I let go of the suffering, then what about all the other people who are suffering? And I'm like, well, you'll actually be able to help them, when you get to steadiness in your own system. So certainly men can look through the website that I have of like my defrosting energy transmissions, and they might find that that they can not trigger when something's coming at them. I think that's where the difficulty is. Like in this like psyche, their stages of development show very clearly where we're it's sort of like if you think of like a bar graph, right? Like
Mhm.
there's all of these different bars, and our levels of maturity to whatever age we are is very different in different fronts. And this is applicable to everyone, right? Our maturity is very various in certain areas of each of our system. So, in the areas where we're solid, we're strong, mature, we can hold space for somebody else and whatever they're going through. And in the places where we're not so very mature, we haven't developed there yet, we don't know how to, that's when we go into defense. And we're like, I need to run for the hills, or I need to fight, or I need to like keep talking about this so we can figure it out. But it doesn't feel like that. Oh, I absolutely know how to handle this, right? So that's a good way to indicate like, where am I frozen? Okay, well, when somebody is screaming this at me, I don't feel steady. Or you're like, okay, what is that about? Like, if you could pick a word that would describe that, like, say, for example, in this, instance, a woman is screaming at a man. There could be lots of different words of why he feels freaked out, right? So pick the one word. It could feel like attacked. It could feel like he feels like he's not good enough in that respect, right? Like, so pick the theme, like what is going on, and that's the area to work, right? That's the area where you can have that growth and that progress. And my perspective on inner child work is drastically different than the prevailing thought process in energy work. So I'm not going to go on it too much, but suffice it to say that I realized on the flip side, because I used to teach inner child work, it was one of the tools that I would guide clients through.
Hmm.
But I realized on the flip side that there's a limitation to that energy tool, right? It's extremely helpful. We've all known and seen breakthroughs in inner child work, pretty much anyone who's ever done it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's helpful, it's productive. But once you get to a certain level of skills and ability to work inside of your own system, there's something much better. And then when you look back in hindsight, you're like, oh, okay, it could only get me so far, right? And so what I see happening is like in this bar graph, right, of like different places in our inner world where sometimes we're good and mature here. And then this one, we're like, I'm 6 years old, right? Once you actually get that worked and resolved, that part of your system goes up incrementally and eventually will get to your own age, essentially, like your
It's
own
that
level of
recalibration. You
that's
know,
correct.
I always talk about that because, that's why some of the inner child stuff is you get through, but then you have to then you're healing it as an adult, while you have to give the grace as a child, but
Yeah.
it's then realizing what you need to do in your adult life to integrate it and to heal it. Once the child's healed or supported, then the healing really becomes for the adult in the present state.
Well, actually, I'm going to say something really shocking that I
All
learned
right, go for it.
is that um, the inner child, while we can have great levels of connection, because when
Mhm.
we are seeing that inner child in our system and it feels all these things, and then we fuse that connection. So basically, we begin to trust ourselves again.
Mhm.
And that's one of the most crucial parts of inner child work. Also, being able to be with your emotions and then also identifying them. Those are like the three like most beneficial aspects of inner child work. But what I realized is that whenever you're having an emotion and you feel young in a particular situation, that's actually your psyche saying, like, check engine, right? Like it's like a check engine light going off. And we go directly to work with the inner child. It's sort of like tearing apart the dashboard to get it to the check engine light when
Yes,
that's not where the issue is. The issue is in the engine,
the
right?
engine.
And so, like, the issue is in our psyche. And what the inner child is telling us is you don't know how to fill in the blank of whatever's going on in your situation.
Sure.
You in your psyche have a developmental spot that's shorter here, and therefore in that area of life is not supporting you. Like
Right.
there's things that we need to learn, and it may not just be one bar of the bar graph, right? It might be three. So
Right. It might be tied to several things in life.
yeah,
Again, I've done a lot of inner work, and you don't realize the little things. Like all the little things that don't bother you, but they really do, or it's just an area of improvement. It doesn't mean that
yeah.
everything is a big issue, but it's things that again could be refined and by that recalibration and being aware of it and seeing it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I just personally love inner development work. I mean, it's like the most rewarding experience because you get to know yourself more, you get to feel better afterwards. You have that more solidity under your system, you grow that foundation out, which can be considered maturity, right? Like you know how to handle this and it just makes for an easier navigation of life. Of course, again, I predominantly deal with romantic relationships, so projection is like the number one thing that happens in romantic relationships, and I think one of the main things that especially like deep level healers come to me with is like, yeah, but is this me? I've been looking everywhere. Is this me or is that really just him? Like, is it just his piece? And I'm like, well, if it's in any way irritating, upsetting, or not up to your standards, then it's your piece. You
Right.
know, there's
Right.
there's no two ways about
Right.
that.
We get to
Yeah.
do it. It's what we notice in ourselves that somebody else might be doing, and you can mention that it could be his piece, but it's also how you deal with it. So it doesn't matter, again, the socks on the floor or something like that. He's not recognizing, and even though you might have mentioned it 15 times, but it's a piece that that you can work on. I assume just using that as a safe,
Yes. That's
yeah.
an example I used last week, actually, when I was speaking. That's a good one because the socks on the floor, whenever you tell someone, hey, I need you to pick your socks up off the floor, you're talking to their mind, right? And this is what I think most people don't have that full experience of yet is that 75% of that relationship is energetic. It's not what you talk about, it's not what you say, it's literally what your system is just simply telling their subconscious. So if you've got these underlying, I call them junk programs running in your system that are just drastically different than what your mind wants the socks off the floor. Your system's like, it's my job to pick his socks up off the floor because this is what we've done for generations and generations and generations, right? You don't know why the hell that program's in your subconscious. You've never even connected with it or identified with it, but all of a sudden he can't figure out how to pick his damn socks up off the floor, right? So, and then we're like, yeah, but that's his responsibility as an adult human. And I'm telling you, I know it sounds awful to think of it this way, but we're energetic beings. I mean, when you look at animals outside, you can see how they interact with one another. They don't need words. They really communicate very clearly. This is my territory, yo.
Right.
Like, get
Yep.
back. It's very clear if they're okay with someone coming into their space and if they're not. And you can see the multitude of finessed interactions. And I'm like, I really do believe that we can shift what we're projecting out and have an experience that's drastically different than what we've experienced before. And
Yeah.
I think men have sort of, and I just say it this way, it's not like I say men are perfectly clear, their energy's fine. No, it's that, certainly we all have wounding, but for generations and generations and generations, that subconscious, that 75% of what was conveyed down the line to all the males was fairly similar. I mean, quite frankly, from let's say back in the 80s, because
Uh,
it's shifted a bit, but let's say from the 80s to like the 1800s or something, the early 1800s, men didn't operate all that differently. You go out into the world, you do your thing, you have the responsibility, you protect, it's like it's fairly similar. Women, on the other hand, have had drastic shifts in recent years where it's like there's this a new set of options,
right.
right? And then you look out and you're like, why are so many women not knowing how to do these new sets of options? Why isn't it working correctly for them? And we're like, well, because we're literally landing new energetics into our system, and the rest of our system doesn't know how to interface with that or hold or support. It's like this most awkward, weird orientation. And that's why I say, like, my best advice to men is like, just know they're undergoing like drastic shifts and they're holding a lot of pain and they're trying to figure it out. They're doing their best, women are doing their best. But quite frankly, in the loudness, I guess, of what's being put out there is the women kind of hammering the men, like, you're not good enough. We're all
Well,
the good men.
I've said this, when I've worked with people, I'm like, well, think about it. What is he might have heard the whole life, from his mom and that
Yeah.
type of issues and things like that. So it all plays together, and we just have to realize that we have blockages, and those blockages, a lot of that's going to also be just communication, right? When you work with couples, they need to communicate, and right, it's the old what is it, men from Venus, from Mars, and the women are from Venus. Yeah, there's languages again. When I said earlier today, and that doesn't make men, we've been trained or, really genetically to be the protector. That doesn't always be the case, and we don't protect, not everybody protects properly. So I'm not about to suggest that, but that's what it's been, right? The hunter-gatherer piece, and, as rightly so, lots of things have changed in the world, and women have a voice now. I have two young ladies, my daughters, and the downside is that you want to teach them to be strong in your voice, but not to me. And that's what
Yeah,
always happens, right? We always want to teach our daughters and our wives to stand up for themselves, except when they talk to us. And that's not, and the truth of the matter is they should be equally comfortable to tell us what they need to tell us as well.
absolutely. And the fact that we as parents may not be properly equipped to be able to handle that,
100%.
we haven't been trained on that. I mean, in my, what was it? I grew up in 1980, like I was born in 1980. So, like, I still had a lot of that messaging of like the parents are the authority. Like,
Yeah,
you don't disrespect them, you don't talk back, da, 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 whatever. I mean, thankfully, my parents weren't like, rigid about that, but there was still some messaging that came through
sure.
about that, and it doesn't allow for our proper development. But there's only been a few generations since then, right, that have sort of been doing it in a little bit more dynamic of a way where, it's not that baby boomer rigidity. But for centuries before then, that's what was landed for children. Therefore, it's like still embedded in our psyche that we do it this way, right? You go back at least 400 years, and that's what's in your energy body. And you're like,
For
holy
sure.
shit.
Yep. Yeah.
Like,
It all that generational thing. So, I always have this section at the end of the episode about walking into my magic garden to plant a seed. You've given us a lot of seeds throughout, a lot of things to think about. What is one seed, especially when we're talking about children, that we can plant either in our children or ourselves to help us get through some of the energy blockage before they get to see Heather?
yeah, right. I would say, um, bringing some attention, some clarity, and some acceptance. I don't love the word normalcy, but it works here. Like some normalcy around it's okay to not feel okay.
Yeah, the
Um,
consistency, right? It's a consistency. It's not normalcy. It's a consistency, a
yeah.
healthy consistency.
Yeah, and that we'll work it out together. We'll
Mm.
put our heads together. We'll do we'll collaborate. I just love collaboration. And I feel like with our future generations, if we can teach good quality collaborations and networking, like that was something I didn't get at all of like, let's utilize each other and like kind of grow together. I mean, it was always a very individualistic type of perspective when I was growing up, and doing it all on your own sucks. It's
No,
just not
one
great.
100%. So how can everybody find you so they don't have to do it by themselves?
For sure. My website is heathercypel.com. That's where you can find the free energy transmission and my other energy transmissions. And I also have a couple of 1 month containers to work with me.
Hmm.
I call it my repair series. So the first one is breakup repair. So it always hurts and is awful and painful after a breakup. But we don't necessarily realize that there's usually a hole in our energy body making us hemorrhage energy and think about them and have suffering still, even if you chose to be the one to end the relationship. Sometimes there's just ruptures and
Hmm.
disruptions
Sure.
that happen to the energy body. So we can work that. And the other repair container is called relationship repair, where if you want to bring some more life into your relationship and have some more peace and harmony or resolve some really deep messed up issues, I hold space for the worst of the worst. So don't hesitate when coming into my space. I can really be present for it, because repair is important.
Yep.
We have to repair first before we grow and move forward.
Thank you so much for your time and for all the information you've given us. I do recommend everybody checking out Heather's website, which will be in the show notes and everything. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
Okay. And for everybody else, as always, we wish you peace and love in your life. Bring that as your foundation. And when you bring your bat, make sure you have those awesome thoughts and just keep being as authentic as you can. Thanks a lot and have a great day.